Hello, Internet, and welcome to Experimental Cataclysm, the show where we talk about recent changes to the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. Now, unfortunately, Windows Update decided to ruin my microphone settings, so I may sound a little bit different today. I don't know if I've fixed that or not. We're going to find out in editing, I guess. But anyway, moving on. First up today from Rennick, we've got a completely game-changing PR that makes it so you can't craft while you're driving. Now yeah, look, most people already were not trying to craft while driving, but it didn't make sense that it was possible at all. So you now get a message printed in a log that says you can't craft while driving. I'm sure someone will complain about this and say, oh, some sort of realism is ruining the game, because that's where everyone always goes. But there you go, simple and easy change, no more crafting while driving. Next up today from Getting Used To, we've got the addition of 2 plastic masks. Now I really only mention this at all because one of them was Dallas from Payday, and I used to be really into Payday. Now the other mask is a no-face mask, which I definitely remembered on my own and did not forget, one of the most beloved animated properties of all time or anything like that. Definitely I got that reference on my own and did not have to ask about it. Anyway, there's a couple of masks for you to go around being awesome in, go with God, like rob a bank, devour someone, whatever you want to do. Moving on, next up today from another C White, we've got a few additions for the Pry Examine action. Now basically, when you examine stuff with this action, you can immediately pry that object. Now if something does not have that action, you have to activate the tool to do it, which can be, it's a few extra key presses, and when you're trying to pop like multiple metal crates in a row, that can be very annoying. So this very simple PR added the action to a few more things like metal crates, a few doors that were missing it, and manhole covers. Now I know this is small and could have easily been overlooked, but I was happy to see this expansion. It's a very small but nice quality of life change. Next up today from Irk, we've got an audit and update to several nightmares in the game. Now the short version here is that nightmares previously were just weirdly specific, and often because of being so specific, they were sort of forcing traits or personality onto your character. And I don't know if that sentence actually made sense, but we're going to talk about it here. So for example, one of the previous nightmares was about you being chased through your school by a specific man, who I believe it would give them a name at random. It's like a principal or teacher or whatever. Now he chases you to the bathroom because he's apparently been spying on students when they were using the toilets. And it's explained to you that you have evidence of his crime, and so he's hunting you down. You gave this evidence to a friend so that they could call the police on your behalf because you couldn't call yourself. Now he stares at you and climbs down from the ceiling, and that's the nightmare. Now in addition to being bizarrely specific, this gives you a lot of information about your character. This is a very specific nightmare that someone with a very specific trauma might have. You're assigning this trauma to my character essentially without my permission. Now I know I've complained about descriptions in the past that tell you how your characters feel. It's the same kind of thing. It's my character. I don't really want to be told that I think that this photo looks like a guy I used to know, or that this teacher that I have this weirdly specific blackmail material for is suddenly chasing me around. It's just weirdly specific, and it basically gives a trait to my character and a past experience to my character that I didn't decide myself. Anyway, the replacement nightmare is significantly simpler, shorter, and it's a more universal experience. So in this one, you run and lock yourself in the bathroom to avoid a bully. You hear the bully approaching, and it turns out it's like a zombie bully, and then you wake up. This is a pretty universal experience, being bullied, and for a character in a zombie apocalypse, great, there's a zombie, that makes tons of sense. And even if you've never been bullied personally, you know someone who has, or you've been persecuted for something. It's a much more universally relatable thing, and it's not a specific trauma to my character. Lots of people have this experience, and even if you don't, just watching popular media and that sort of thing, it sort of instills that understanding of what a bully actually is inside of you. Hopefully that all made sense. So while I don't hate most of the nightmares that existed previously, some of them were wildly specific, and in general they're just a very long entry and should be shortened. As Urk points out, getting the same dream multiple times as well or across multiple characters when they're so specific is also a bit strange, and abstracting them in this way makes a lot of sense to me personally. Now there were also some comments added in the JSON here just to make things more clear for people who might want to contribute to this section of the game in the future. There are also not very many nightmares in general, so if someone is reading this or listening to me speak and you're feeling like a little creative writing today and you're willing to follow this new style, then this looks like a great area for expansion, and I would encourage you to check it out and maybe write some nightmares for us. Now beyond that, I'm sure some people probably really liked these long, overly specific dreams, but I do think this was a good PR overall and makes just a ton of sense to me to change all of this. But anyway, moving along, next up today from Prociani, we've got a tweak to bikinis. Now specifically, this will make bikini tops and bottoms spawn together rather than bikini bottoms spawning like constantly in the game. And so this actually came up in my recent Sky Island playthrough. A bikini bottom is required for crafting one of the base upgrades, and at first I thought like, oh, that sounds hard to find, but then in reality bikini bottoms spawned constantly. They're extremely common, even though they were spawning just as regular underwear. Now listen, hello ladies. Now I'm not someone who wears bikinis, okay, but I would imagine that most people don't wear them under like a business suit or jeans or whatever when they're just going about their regular day, and it seemed like in the game they were spawning as though they were just regular underwear, and that didn't really make a ton of sense. But it is hard for me to read item groups, for the record. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. They're very nested. But anyway, the solution here was to make the bikini top and bikini bottoms spawn together, so you're more likely to see a consistent garment rather than just these random pieces under regular clothing. However, the thing I really appreciate here, which I didn't even know that we could do, it looks like they were set up so that the top and bottom would also match their variant. In other words, you're not going to find a blue bikini top with a red bikini bottom. They should actually match up and be the same variants. Now I'm assuming I read that right. I just, really respect that you took the time, like the extra annoying step of setting that up, because that's how it should be, and I appreciate that. But anyway, that's the change, and I mention it because because of my Let's Play and how many comments I did get about like people just saying like, yeah, it is weird how many people are wearing bikinis for no obvious reason. So I like this change, and yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Next up today from MNG Cataclysm, we've got the addition of some artwork. Now the PR planned to add sketches, pottery, paintings, sculptures, things like that, as well as the ability for players to create some of that art themselves. Now in the end though, it looks like unfortunately they did not add the player crafting element to this, so you cannot make these things currently. Now I also did not see any pottery spawns either in this PR, even though they mention it as something they wanted to add, unless clay sculptures are considered pottery, which like maybe they are, but to me pottery is like pots and vases. I don't know if that is correct or not. Now anyway, it's unclear if these things will be added in a future PR or not, but it is a cool idea overall, so I figured I would mention it. But anyway, this did add a variety of artworks and snippets for those artworks, so you'll get to see various combinations of phrases and materials based on what gets generated. Now the easiest way to see this currently is to check out the newly created art gallery location. Now I mean, we've had art galleries before, but this is a new layout that contains these new items. Now you will find sculptures and paintings in the display cases. Ideally, I'll have been showing some of these while I've been talking, and these use snippets to pull various pieces of information and smush it all together to give a description of the piece. Now you've probably seen that in other games, right? In RimWorld, it just sort of mad libs a bunch of stuff together for art. It's kind of similar to that. However, most of the information currently is very basic, but of course people can expand that in the future. It is a nice idea, and the fact that they were given some amount of trade value here, I also kind of like that. So I can now commit an art heist in Cataclysm Cataclysm and then sell my loot to a fence, aka Rubik. So yeah, I like this change. I think it's very cool. I would like to see the player-made art. I think would be really nice as well. I don't think most of us would actually use that as a feature because it just probably doesn't do much for you. We don't have a way of tracking, like again, to use RimWorld as an example, they track the beauty of the room, which affects your character's mood, things like that. We don't actually have any of that currently, so it would just be for aesthetics. But yeah, I would love to see our ability to make, you know, a painting or a pottery or whatever, and we could get a mood buff for working on an art piece and kind of working out our frustrations or whatever. So yeah, great idea. Anyway, moving on. Next up today from 10millimaster, we've got some adjustments and reworks to Muzzle Devices. And when I say Muzzle Devices, what I mean is like suppressors and muzzle brakes, things like that. It does seem to be very focused around suppressors specifically. So the first bit of the PR is pretty easy. Their lengths and weights and sizes, stuff like that, were adjusted to be more accurate to the real-life modifications that they're based on. Really nothing to talk about there. That's pretty straightforward. Now, the second thing it did was remove some of the more nonsensical suppressors and recipes. So for example, the soda bottle suppressor, which I've read about 40 times and can't seem to say it correctly, but that suppressor was removed for basically being worthless. And then the third thing done here is that the remaining suppressors had their recipes tweaked. For example, they now require the thread tapping quality, which is a tool quality I don't recall ever seeing before, but I also don't think it was added in this specific PR. Alternatively, instead of threading a completely new crafted item, you can also make some with existing material. So what I mean there is that instead of crafting it completely from scratch and threading it yourself, you can actually instead craft it using an existing muzzle brake to skip some of those steps. Now, I think that's the gist of what was changed here, and as for my opinions, well, I don't really know. Suppressors are actually pretty hard to find in the game in my experience, and them being craftable makes us much more likely to actually obtain and use them. So in my head, various suppressors should be craftable, or we should find them more frequently in the game. But that doesn't necessarily track with realism, that's more of a game balance thing, so I defer to the people who actually know quite a lot about guns. And I happen to know that the person who made this PR knows quite a lot about firearms, so I don't know, I just trust the changes. I guess it's all fine to me. I have no particular take here, I guess. Hit me up in the comments. You know, I know people have lots of opinions, especially on the gun stuff, but as always, please keep it civil, blah blah blah, you know how this works. Moving along, next up today from Dr. Boomstick, we've got some changes and an overall audit to shotguns. Now, the stated intention here seemed to be to clean up shotguns in general and remove some inconsistencies. For example, one of the shotguns was the variant of another shotgun, giving them identical stats despite having very different barrel lengths, which is a big deal because barrel length actually affects like the stats of the gun, so it didn't make sense that they would be identical but also substantially different. Now, in addition to that, some guns were just so unusual, or in some cases they're completely illegal, and it didn't really make sense for them to be spawning as often as they did. I believe that's the case for the SPAS 12 shotgun we're going to talk about here in a second. But anyway, looking at the bullet points in the PR, which by the way, thank you as always for laying out your PR with bullet points, makes my job a lot easier. Now, this removed the SPAS 12 variant, which as far as I can tell has been fully removed from the game. I know it's an iconic weapon that we've seen, we've all seen this in dozens of video games, but yeah, as far as I can tell, completely gone now. I might be missing something, but it looks like it's been removed to me. I didn't see it transition to a different object. I didn't see it get migrated or anything like that. It looks like it was fully removed. Maybe I missed something, I'm not sure. Now, the variant that I mentioned above with the incorrect barrel length was also corrected, and then 3 new Benelli shotguns were added, 2 as completely new weapons and 1 as a variant. And that's the gist of the PR. Remove the SPAS 12, fix the barrel length thing, and then add 3 new shotguns. However, unfortunately, this did lead to one issue. Apparently, the incorrect barrel length variant, which was the Mossberg 500 security, was removed as I said, but it was later made to be a variant of a different gun. And that probably sounds confusing. But as a result, the game has had some issues with migrating because there doesn't seem to be a way to migrate a variant. Now this means that if you load up a save with one of these already existing, you will receive an error message. There are a few issues about this currently on GitHub, and unfortunately does not appear to have a solution at the moment. Now I'm not sure how this will be resolved exactly, because I don't think there is a solution unfortunately at the moment, but if you do get an error related to the, was it Mossberg security, that would be why. Anyway, moving on, next up today, I'm just going to put my avatar on screen while we talk about this one, I think, but we've got a PR that adds rewards after you successfully help Dino Dave work on his big project, let's say. Now I know, look, it's an update show where we talk about spoilery things all the time, but in my opinion, Dino Dave and Food Person are like the two main humanoid mascots that we have in the game, and it's rare that we actually see much happen regarding them. So I would rather you discover these rewards on your own, and I do think they fit perfectly with the theme of Dino Dave, and I think they are just like a clever and wonderful addition in general. I really like this quite a lot. Now this is from Carl Ark, by the way. I think you did a great job on this. Now there's a link to the PR in the description of the video if you do want to spoil yourself, but otherwise I would just encourage you to go out and help Dino Dave on his mission and reap the profound, earth-shattering rewards. It's genuinely just a very nice thing that they added as a kind of a final benefit to like finishing off the Dino Dave stuff. I like it in general. I think it's a really cool thing. So yeah, just go help Dino Dave and you'll find out. Don't worry about it. And then finally today, also something I'm not really going to cover in detail because it's new and fancy and people should definitely check it out on their own. But you know, we've got something called LIXA, which is oh god, okay, it's laser interferometer exodimensional resonance assay, which sure. It was described in the PR as a globally unique science lab dungeon with some lore ending in a combat gauntlet. But anyway, this PR currently comes from D. Pavonis, but they did DM me and they said, quote, I would like to make a humble request that if you cover this change, that you please give the lion's share of the credit to the original author/PR, as I feel that the original was roughly 95% complete when it was abandoned and just needed a little more polish before it was ready to go. So first of all, respect for giving credit where it's due. This was originally from Chi-Chit 1044 and it came about 8 months ago. Now again, I'm not going to cover this in detail because it's basically a late game dungeon with lots of combat and at least one boss type creature. But it did add the location itself. It added new items, new monsters, the boss that I mentioned, new terrain, a lot of new traps, and just all sorts of stuff. I'm not really sure about the lore here exactly. I know they specifically mentioned it containing lore and being, of course, about like dimensional stuff and physics and all that, which I assume connects to the lore surrounding the arrival of the blob on our planet, but I don't know that for sure. Now currently this location is globally unique, meaning that only one will ever spawn, which makes it pretty unlikely that you'll encounter it very easily or reliably. However, there is a separate PR that will hopefully add a mission from the hub that points you directly to this dungeon's location. The hub is a pretty common find, despite also being like a unique location, so hopefully that will help you reliably find this dungeon when you want to. And it looks like the signpost PR was merged recently, so looking at what D. Pavonis told me here, it says, looks like the PR adding the mission to the hub, signposting LIXA just got merged. About the only non-obvious thing about it, I hope, is that you need to turn in 3 NRE recordings of any size to the intercom to get the contract to show up. So although I'm not overly familiar with the hub, I don't usually mess with them. I did ask them for a little context. These are the storm recordings, and I'll just like leave it at that. You should probably know what that means, I assume. And you need to deliver a few of those before this mission to go to the new like dungeon is going to be available. So that's through the intercom with the hub, and yeah, that's just some additional context here. Now the PR from D. Pavonis also contains a large number of screenshots, so if you do sort of want to prepare or get spoilers, you can check that out, link in the description. But overall, this seems like a huge, very interesting location, albeit one I probably personally won't get to for a while. And I'm pretty happy to see this. I believe it was described initially as a quote mini dungeon, although when I was looking at it, it did seem pretty big to me. And I just love this sort of stuff. People are always looking for end game things, like later game things to do, and this one seems genuinely interesting and unique. And I would just say to Chi-Chit 1044, I'm not sure why your PR fell apart, all those months ago, but I think you made something pretty interesting here, and shout out to D. Pavonis, of course, for picking that up and polishing it and making sure it finally got into the game. So yeah, just an overall pretty interesting thing here. I know I didn't give you many details about it, but it really is one of those things I think people would prefer to explore themselves. And of course, if you do want spoilers, again, link in the description down below. You can easily see these screenshots and like get a lot of information out of that. So yeah, those spoilers are out there if you want them. But yeah, beyond that, just get out there and explore it for yourself. Let me know what you think. It seems really cool to me. I don't know. With that though, I think this video draws to a close. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope I informed you about something cool or interesting that's been changing in the game, and yeah, I'll see you in a couple weeks with another episode. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.